Well, it's a good day for Minnesota, and I think what it shows is Minnesota's economy is continuing to grow. I think it shows that the actions that the DFL-controlled legislature and the governor took last year have put the state on very stable footing. And this budget, our first look at it is, it's the first real structurally sound budget forecast we've got, the strongest budget forecast we've got since 1999. So I think we've gotten the state on very good footing. And I think we're in a very strong position in this biennium now, in this session, to continue to pay back some of the different kind of counting measures and borrowing that has been done in previous bienniums in order, during that period of time back to 99, when a number of measures had to be used to keep the state's budget in balance. So the $1.2 billion that we see in this biennium is going to provide a tremendous opportunity to, I think, use that one-time money very wisely. Clearly, the budget reserve needs some additional attention. I think it's a good opportunity to put some additional money. I don't know if the question was asked about our debt capacity, but I think there's going to be an appetite to do some additional capital investment beyond what is probably available for us to borrow. This one-time money in this biennium is going to provide an opportunity to bolster up our capital investment bill. A word of caution about the structural side of this. The $2.6 billion looks like and is really good news. But I think what you want to remember is we counted the inflation on the revenue side, but we did not count any inflation on the spending side. So it assumes we have flat spending in the next biennium. That, if you factor that in, the footnote is in the forecast, about $1.1 billion would come off of the 2.6. So, and my other word of caution about the next biennium is, if you look at the spreadsheet on the Healthcare Access Fund, the Healthcare Access Fund is going to have about a $647 million deficit in the next biennium. We all know that. I think we have to address that. I think the Senate is going to pursue, to some level at least, trying to address the shortfall in the Healthcare Access Fund in the next biennium. So there are some needs both in this biennium and the next, and the good news is we've got some money to be able, I think, to meet those and continue to have a structural budget for our state going forward into the next biennium and beyond.
Minnesota's economy is performing well because of the hardworking men and women from across the state. The honestly balanced budget passed by the DFL legislature and signed by the governor last year has created the confidence and stability necessary for our economy to grow. To withstand any future economic vitality and to help bring stability into the future, we believe it's really important to reinforce our rainy day fund. As Senator Bakk mentioned, bolstering the reserve will be a priority for the Senate for one reason, among others, that the Council of Economic Advisors recommends that our state reserve level be more closer to 4.9%, and right now, as was mentioned earlier, we're at about 1.7% of non-dedicated revenue, or $661 million. So again, I just add that bolstering the budget reserve to reinforce our state's fiscal stability is something that I think you'll hear talked about a lot in this short legislative session.
Well, in the past year we have gone from a budget deficit to a budget surplus. We've paid back the schools. Our economy continues to recover. And our task this year is to keep building on that momentum, which we believe is investing in middle-class Minnesotans. That's what we did in 2013, and that's what we think we need to continue to do in 2014. The budget is really good news for the state budget, but more importantly, it's good news for Minnesotans, and it shows that our economy is continuing to do well. It also shows that the gloom and doom predictions of the Republicans is not bearing out. They're claiming that our 2013 budget was going to collapse the economy. They're wrong. And this budget surplus shows that. And it's time for the Minnesota Republicans to stop rooting against Minnesotans and rooting against our economy. The Republicans, I would note, did give themselves a huge pat on the back in 2012 and 2011 when they had a budget surplus, but a budget of a lesser amount, but a budget surplus that was based on school shifts and papering over huge deficits in our state budget. I hope that this time they're going to be as excited about the budget deficit or budget surplus that we have because it's actually based on real numbers. I was also surprised, I have to say, watching Twitter at some of the Republican gubernatorial candidates who've been making this claim that we raised taxes by $2 billion and now we have a $1 billion surplus, and they just do the math. Well, I hope by the time they're up for election in November they actually understand the state budget, because what they're forgetting is that we invested a significant amount in things that Minnesotans want, like investing in Minnesota schools, investing in property tax relief, investing in job creation. If you don't count that side of the ledger, their math may add up, but it shows a particularly poor understanding of Minnesota's state budget. With this forecast, though, I have to say there's no reason for us not to move swiftly to put together a budget that works for middle-class Minnesotans. The House is prepared and we are ready to move on that. We already passed a relief for people suffering from the propane crisis across the state. I'm really pleased that that passed unanimously. We are close on minimum wage, and it's time to act and get that bill done. We have a good middle-class tax bill that has moved out of our tax committee and that is moving forward. It is time to get that to the governor's desk. It's time to act on all of those things and act swiftly. We do have a significant surplus of $2.6 billion in the next 2 years. That's a significant cushion for the state of Minnesota and larger than a cushion we've had in quite a long time. To keep this middle-class economic recovery going, now is not the time just to stuff cash in the bed cushions, under the mattress. Now is the time to move ahead and invest in middle-class Minnesotans, and that's what we intend to do in the House of Representatives, and I think it's the right direction for Minnesota.
So good morning. We're wearing our running shoes and this session, and we're already off to the races, as you might note. Today's good news is a really solid foundation for our action as we work to help Minnesota's economy continue to grow even stronger. This first week is the most productive session week that I've experienced since I've been here, and the most productive that I can recall. We took swift action on the issue of propane to make sure that Minnesotans, especially in greater Minnesota, aren't left out in the cold because of the needed energy assistance. We're moving quickly also on the minimum wage. The conference committee met last night, and we're going to make sure that there's more money in the pockets of 350,000 Minnesotans when that is finally put on the governor's desk and signed. And we are moving decisively on middle-class tax cuts to expand economic opportunity for middle-class Minnesotans across the state. We will not cease in our progress for Minnesota. More Minnesotans are working, more children have access to early childhood education, and Minnesotans are paying less for college tuition. That's progress that we believe in. It's progress that we will build on swiftly. Minnesotans are feeling more confident about our future, and so are we. I'm very hopeful about what we're able to achieve for Minnesotans this session. I look forward to seeing you throughout.
Senator Bakk, does this forecast give you comfort at all in supporting the repeal of the B2B taxes or the federal conformity?
Well, I think it definitely makes both more likely. I believe the Tax Reform Committee heard the B2B, some testimony on that yesterday. We will be hearing the other bills around the other sales tax provisions, and then start moving into hearing about some of the conformity provisions that the House has heard. But I do think the possibility of that is greatly improved by the forecast.
Sounds like the House and Senate may have some differences on the budget reserve. Am I not hearing that right?
Well, I think that the $2.6 billion does give us some comfort about our ability to move forward and continue to invest in Minnesotans. That's not the middle-class Minnesotans. That's not to say that we shouldn't be conscious of what our spending means in this biennium and the next biennium, and we will certainly do that. It doesn't mean that we should spend all the money that is available. But I also think that we have a significant choice to make about continuing to invest in Minnesotans, which seems to be succeeding with the results of this economic forecast.
Speaker, the Republicans say we are at a point in time here, and that in the future, because of what happened a year ago with the tax increases, that it's going to get worse. We're going to slide backwards. You addressed that a little bit, but they're saying that we haven't seen the effect of this yet.
I think they're wrong. I think that they want Minnesota's economy to go down because it would serve them politically, and I think that's terrible for Minnesotans, and they really should be ashamed of themselves.
You think they want the economy to go bad?
Well, I mean, that seems to be the predictions that they're making, and I don't think the evidence shows that that's the case.
To follow on the question that I believe Don posed a minute ago, I mean, I've had the opportunity to speak to you both at more length about the objectives you have for this session and how you see this surplus. There are real differences. In view of that, and in view of the compromises you know you're going to need to make, is there a means of acting quickly to reach a global agreement, or is this something that's going to need to be hashed out till May?
Well, I think it depends on your definition of quickly. I mean, after today, there's 10 weeks left in this legislative session. During my tenure here, 10 weeks is a pretty compressed time period to get bills heard, bills to the floor, bills passed, conference committees appointed, conference committees work out differences. It's in my mind, even if we run well into May, it's probably a pretty concise session.
So, and I would just reiterate, I think on a couple of things, like the minimum wage, we can move quickly on that. I think we're getting very close. And on, the tax bill that we have, there is an urgency to it. We have an April 1st deadline on the warehouse tax that we want to address before we get there. We have people filing right now their taxes on the tax conformity. We want to make sure that we make the changes as swiftly as possible so there's not as much confusion for Minnesotans and make their lives as easy as possible. And I know the governor set a March 14th date that he would like that tax bill to get to him, and I think that we should try to meet that.
Are either of you going to recommend any additional spending? You didn't mention that.
So I think that there's general consensus among all, both not bipartisanly, that have bipartisan support. I've been corrected on that too many times. That has bipartisan support for the care, providing more money for long-term care providers to allow them to pay their workers a little bit more, and they certainly, I think everybody agrees that that's an important investment we ought to make. Beyond that, I think there will be interest in using cash to enhance a bonding bill, and then I think our committees are going to have to work through a number of these other issues, but those are the two that come to mind.
Does this forecast make it easier for, let's start with Leader Murphy here, to find $63 million for a new building?
We had a pretty exhaustive hearing last night, an informational hearing in the House, and as a result of that, I think members asked a lot of questions. We didn't get all the information that we'd hoped through the course of the hearing from the administration in terms of the cost of alternatives. So we need to get that information before we can proceed.
But let's go back to my question. Does it make it easier for you to find that $63 million?
I think the question for us is really if we think that the going forward with that building right now is something that the House can support.
Senator Bakk?
Well, the Senate has acted on it. We're just kind of waiting for the House to act, and there's no need to find cash. I mean, it's a lease purchase project like the Freeman building and the Anderson building were done. The state didn't use cash to build those buildings either or bond for them, so there's really no need to commit any general fund resources in this biennium to pay for the building.
Since there is a surplus at this point, would you want to go ahead and pay that with cash, come back and repass the bill in a different way?
I don't see a reason to have to revisit that.
Would it be cheaper to build if you and use over the years if you went with cash instead of the lease purchase?
I would have to defer that to admin. I don't know the answer to that. The recent buildings have been built with this same lease purchase option. I assume there's a reason admin wants to build them that way.
Senator Bakk, are you on board with getting a tax bill to Governor Dayton by March 14th, or even do you think in the month of March is feasible?
I think you'd have to ask Senator Skoye and Senator Rest that question. I haven't met with them yet at all this session. I'm hoping to have a meeting with them this afternoon, and we'll discuss that. I do think, having some experience with conformity issues, even if we were to commit to try and do that and get something to the governor in mid-March, I think there's a serious question. Most people file electronically nowadays, so I think there's a serious question at what time can software actually be updated so people can actually do it? It's more than us just passing the bill. Someone has to update all the software in order for people to push the button with all the updated changes that the legislature's made. So I think the issue of the urgency for tax filing for conformity purposes is not a huge concern to me. I think it's probably too late this year, and I personally have already filed. But there is always an opportunity for people to, if they think there's a provision that's being considered, there's always an opportunity for people to file for an extension, and as long as they pay the tax liability that they owe on April 15th, by April 15th, it's relatively easy to get an extension to when you actually would file your return. The other option that's available to people like me, for instance, that have already filed, is you can always file an amended return after April 15th.
Senator Bakk, the House passed the tax committee passed a tax bill that was at about $500 million. Governor Dayton says he wants it at about $600 million. From your perspective, can your caucus go that high in terms of tax cuts?
Well, it's easier. It's easier today than it was yesterday, knowing what the numbers are. I don't know what all the other needs are yet. We're going to have a conversation in the caucus that of the $1.2 billion that is available to us in this biennium, how much should be committed to tax relief, how much should be committed to one-time spending, and how much might we want to commit to ongoing spending. And we have not had that conversation yet, so I really don't know the answer to that.
From your perspective, I guess the other question would be, what do you think needs to be in the reserve for your comfort level?
Well, if I was king, I would try and satisfy the needs of our state, of our rating agencies. And I believe there's a number in the budget forecast that the rating agencies say a AAA-rated state should have, and if you're not a AAA-rated state, they expect you to have even a higher budget reserve. And I think Senator Sieben might actually have the number. It's high enough that I'm not so naive to think we could ever get there, but if we could get there, I think it's fiscally the right place to be.
And I just have to, say I think that we put together a structurally sound budget, and the rating agencies seem to be very pleased with the direction that Minnesota is moving already, even with the current level of budget reserve. So I have to say that concerns me somewhat less.
With a $408 million improvement here, are you going to have to hold down expectations for some new spending ideas that will surface?
I don't think our members understand that this is not a budget year, and they see there may be groups out that are pushing for more and more spending, but our members understand that we're not reopening the budget process. We're going to be dealing with things that we need to fix or grow from last year, so I think our members are in a very good place with regard to that.
I will say about that, I am looking forward to the governor's supplemental budget recommendations. All the state departments report to him, and if they have some shortfalls, and I understand there are some problems over at corrections, that we are going to have to find a way to put a little bit more money in over at corrections. I expect the governor's probably going to recommend something there. There's some issues at Minskew for a small amount of money. Don't know whether the governor's going to include that, but the chancellor has been to see me. But I agree with the speaker. I think whatever we do relative to opening up the budget will be very, very narrow, and I think a lot of people are probably going to have some disappointed expectations, many of the interest groups that work around the building. But people do need to remember this is not a budget year.
Senator Bakk, I just want to be clear. The governor's saying he wants to have a tax bill on his desk by March 15th, and the House seems to be inclined to that. You didn't say yes or no. Do you think that can be done by that time from the Senate's perspective?
Well, I think that's pretty aggressive. I think, and those of you that have been around here know that once you get this room set up in the form of a conference committee to work out differences, sometimes that can take quite a while. I think it will depend on how much the Senate Tax Committee is willing to line up with where the House is today. But clearly, if there are differences that lead us to a conference committee, I think getting something out in mid-March is probably difficult. If a conference committee is not needed, then I think it's a possibility.
All right. Thank you.